So I'm just going to talk through how we've worked with nfpSynergy and what we've done since then. And I guess kind of as I was writing this presentation, I was just thinking about, before we embarked upon that work, what were some of the things that would have been helpful for me to know, and some of the decision points, as I think will probably become painfully obvious to all of you as I go through the presentation. I'm not a data person. I lead our fundraising team. I enjoy putting strategies together. I enjoy trying to deliver growth with teams, and I enjoy thinking about audiences. But data is not my bag. And for me, that was one of the scariest things about embarking upon any kind of segmentation, that I was all of a sudden going to be absolutely deluged in a ton of data and not know what to do with it. But more importantly, how to make the segmentation be something that we could practically use. So I'm kind of almost positioning this as it's going to start to feel like a bit of an idiot's guide to how to implement fundraising segmentation, but hopefully that will be quite useful, because I know before I started it felt quite intimidating. So just to tell you a little bit about my organisation. So I work at THT, which is the leading HIV and sexual health charity in the UK. And THT was born out of activism for the AIDS crisis particularly in the 80s. In fact, next year is it's the 40th anniversary of THT, and 40 years since Terry Higgins died. He was one of the first people to die of AIDS in the UK. And the organisation, as I said, was set up by activists in his memory. And first of all, it was about supporting people who are living with AIDS. And luckily, well, not luckily actually, because a lot of work gone into it, but fortunately, that work is as much now around stopping HIV transmission completely, because we have the tools to do it, as it is around supporting people who are living with. And HIV is now a lifelong condition for most people who have it, that is not going to cause really any great issues, and people living with HIV now can live as long and normal a life as if they weren't living with HIV. And so that does, whilst that's obviously an amazing thing, that does obviously present us with a bit of an identity issue, because THT was always there in response to a crisis, but we're no longer in a crisis, but we've still got a job to do to support people and stop transmission. Alongside that, we also do a lot of work in sexual health. And whilst HIV is a part of sexual health, very often they are looked at separately. And so we needed to think about how those two parts of our work fit together in the public consciousness. Before THT, I worked at Prostate Cancer UK, obviously a men's cancer charity, and I was there for just over 7 years. And I'd say over the last 4 or 5 of those, we did see huge growth. And a big part of that was through a new approach that we were taking towards audiences, particularly taking the engagement approach, where we were looking at our audiences as people who would help to deliver all of the strategy, be that receiving or giving of a service or value or money or whatever, as opposed to just looking at someone being a donor, someone being a beneficiary, someone being a volunteer. But there were challenges for us in doing that, particularly when we did segmentation. And I think we struggled, and I think they have gone on to struggle a bit with how, once they've got the segmentation, and I'll refer to that a bit later as to what it looked like, how it could be used and how that could be used to drive forward decisions, particularly around products and messaging. So when I joined THT, which is just over 2 years ago in January 2019, I always say if I knew at the time some of the things that I found out since, I may not have joined the organisation, because there was quite a big job that needed to be done to drive fundraising forward. We had an organisational strategy which didn't really match our work. So we weren't able to say, here's our strategy and here's the different things that we're doing that are going to deliver it. There was, as I've talked about, this tension between HIV and AIDS and sexual health. Our messaging was, and still is to a degree, a bit all over the place. On the one hand, we were saying to people, HIV is nothing to be feared, it's no longer a death sentence, and you can live a perfectly normal, happy, healthy life if you are living with HIV. But on the other hand, we want to stop the transmission of HIV, because we still don't want people to be getting it. We think that we can eradicate HIV transmission, but to get people to support that, you've got to say why it's important to stop it. We have to be able to give a case. And so what we're finding is that people were saying to us, we don't really know what your organisation stands for anymore. So we'd had some very distinct audiences that we would have been talking to, and we'd lost our way a bit with those people. I found that the team was underdeveloped, it hadn't been invested in, teams working very much in silos with loads of different communications, not in any kind of uniformity. And we didn't know who our audiences were anymore. So the first steps were I put a bit of a plan in place, a development plan in place for fundraising, just working with teams about the things very internal that needed to change. So nothing was changing externally yet. Really thinking internally about how we were going to move some of these things forward, and really nuts and bolts things like getting sign-off sorted and how we were briefing people and supporter care, and we were looking for quick wins for growth, but there weren't many. So it became really obvious to me that we had to wait until we had proper audience research in place before we were going to be able to drive growth forward. So we set about audience research within a couple of months. And I think that is, as Kean says, about 2 years ago now. That process took from, I think we went out to the competitive pitch in probably around this time of year, in the spring, and we were only getting to the end of it at Christmas. So it was a big, long piece of work, but we did do a really robust piece of work. But I think one of the big things that I decided to do at that point, a few months in, I was like, okay, I've got to dig deep in. I've got to dig deep here, except this isn't a quick fix, except I'm here for the long haul, and I'm going to have to be really patient with all of this. And so, and if anyone is thinking about doing audience research, I'd say, don't just do it in isolation. Look at the different strategic things you might need to drive forward as well, and link it to those, because audience research done properly can help you to really drive forward different elements of strategy. And I think I'll go on in a bit to demonstrate what that looks like. So working with nfpSynergy, they came very strongly recommended. A previous colleague had said, and this may not float everyone's boat, and I don't mean it quite literally, but they said they'll just put your arms around you and make it work. And what really did work for us with NFP is that they didn't just approach it by saying, and no one's paid me to say this, by the way, they didn't just approach it from the point of view of saying, okay, here's the small thing, or the challenge that you've asked us to work with, and we're not going to deviate from that. We won't look outside of that. They took a very holistic interest in the organisation and about how this is going to drive different things forward, and that was part of the big appeal for me. It was a very practical and easy to follow approach, and we then put them through a competitive pitch. And there were lots of different people who wanted to do different things. That some agencies were saying. I mean, one agency came along and said you can do 12 interviews with just, individuals, and we can analyse that data. But we didn't have any information at all, and we were very nervous about doing that. Some people were saying do focus groups first, and then we'll go and do a survey. But we felt quite strongly we needed to go to a broad range of people first, and then drill it down, and then define what we were finding through focus groups. And we went backwards and forwards on this, but in the end, we decided that was the right approach. And the team we were working with at NFP really helped us just to kind of refine our thinking around that and to make sure we got an approach that was going to work for where we were at that particular time. We really did have no assumptions, no audiences. There was stuff from a very long time ago, but we weren't sure if we just needed to just walk away from all of that. So it was decided a survey followed by focus groups was the best way. So what we wanted to get out of this and how we're using it now was to give us a brief as to how we were going to develop new fundraising initiatives. So a product has to meet the audience. And products fail because they're not right for the audience. So before we went and put anything else out there, we needed to know, who are we talking to? Who cares about what we do and is going to want to support it? And then once we've identified them, what are the reasons that they care and what are the reasons that they want to give? It's really important to understand why they're supporting you, and then how they want to hear about it. So really helping us with messaging. We needed to know which bits of our work different people were interested in supporting. As I said, we've got parts of our work around stopping HIV transmission, bits are around helping people to live well with HIV, and other parts around sexual health, which were going to be the audiences that we could sell which bits of work to, and we got that through it. So the questionnaire that we came up with working with NFP was really, really important, because we had to make sure it was going to tell us these things at the end of it. And we spent a lot of time on it, and it was really, really worth it. But at the end, as I've said, we needed to get something that was going to be very practical. And there's a couple of types. I mean, there's probably way more than this of segmentation. You have one that splits people out by their attitudes and what they think, and that might not be connected to you. It just might be what drives them as individuals. Or, you know, Prostate Cancer UK, we had our segmentation was based on whether people were driven by emotions and stats of emotions and feelings, or stats and facts, or stories, or is it going to be demographic? And so based on your age, for us, sexual orientation, your gender, your ethnicity, where you live, etc. And your cause drives that, or it did for us. So as I said, this is the focus, this is the process we went through. So a survey first, which we put out to our database, plus we tried to recruit cold people through our social media channels. And then we recruited for focus groups in places where, you know, THT had got, well, not necessarily where THT had got key support, but once we've got the audiences where we felt we were going to find the people who sat within those audiences. So for us, that was London, Brighton and Glasgow. And we wanted to find out from people who they are, so all of that demographic stuff, what they cared about, life generally, but also in connection to our work, and how they wanted to get involved. And we did filter them down. So we assumed that we were probably unlikely. So we put some questions in just to sort of weaken the chaff a bit, really. We assumed that if you didn't support LGBT rights, you were very unlikely to support an HIV charity. So that was a filter question we applied at the start. So I've talked a bit about how we kind of made a decision about what kind of segmentation we'd go with. And it's important just to give a bit of a background on HIV and AIDS. So my picture has actually gone over one of the key words on this. HIV/AIDS disproportionately affected gay men, MSM, men who have sex with men, and Black communities, in particular people from Black African communities. And treatment for it, when it stopped effectively being a death sentence, although there are people around from pre-96 who diagnosed pre-96, treatment became widely available in 1996. So the relationship people tend to have towards HIV is very different after those points, because there were much worse outcomes pre-1996 as to afterwards. I mean, basically, it's quite binary. People tended not to survive, or people did survive, and it became a lifelong condition, and treatment has got better and better and better and better. Equally, the history, because of the disproportionate amount of gay men, or men who have sex with men, who have been affected by HIV/AIDS, the history of LGBT rights is very closely connected to it. So for us, it became very much about demographics. I think it was Kian actually who did the analysis on the results of the survey when it came out. I'm no statistician, as again, it's probably obvious, but what they'll do is look for, when you cluster the data in different ways, what are some of the defining things that makes your data look different. So Prostate Cancer UK, as I said, it was that feelings that people had. This is how I like to receive information, and this is what motivates me. And that was where we saw the groups become really distinct. Here, it was flat. That wasn't showing any distinct groups at all. Everyone looked the same. When we looked at demographics, however, it was very distinct. So it became for us about those four things: sexual orientation, age, gender, and ethnicity. And I think the thing there is, it's not just about who they are, it's about why this matters to people. And that's what's really important here. So what part of our work can we then align with those groups? What do they care about making a difference towards? And we also saw that what HIV/AIDS was coming out, you know, much more motivating. But there is one group, sexual health is quite key as well. So it was a bit of a big choice for us. And when you do a segmentation, there will come a point at which a load of data will be presented back to you and a load of choices you'll be offered to make. And it's really important to get the senior leadership of your organisation involved at that stage, because for us, there had been a big debate going around for a very long time. Is THT basically a gay people's organisation? And this was really a really strategic point for us, a really strategic decision for us to make. And we decided at that point, we felt we could get much more support quickly by targeting the LGBT population and two segments of it. But there were another two audiences where we think we've got the opportunity to do more, but we're going to be a bit longer term. But it was totally vital to get everyone on board. And we also accepted that we might be going to the LGBT audiences and saying, we want you to help all people affected by HIV and AIDS. And they may not be LGBT, and they may be heterosexual, they may be black, although obviously you have black LGBT people. And so it's not just saying you're a group of people and we want you to only help people within your own community. And so these four audiences emerged. So two LGBT audiences, and really it is mainly male within those audiences. One above 45 and one below 45. And the difference there is that 45-year-old age group broadly aligns with people who are becoming adults at around 1996. So older than that, people have a very different experience of what HIV/AIDS meant, and younger than that, it's generally more positive. With Black African population or Black community, obviously there's more of an international angle, and with the female 45 to 54 audience, what we saw there was a very strong link to sexual health, but driven by mainly being parents and wanting their kids to have access to good sexual health information. Loads of people knew who we were. Not a lot of people knew what we did. So we knew there was something really clear that we had to do. We had to state really solidly, here is our belief now. Now, the great thing is that we've been working on our strategic focus for over the next 10 years, and we've got a 10-year ambition to stop HIV transmission by 2030. So that was coming up alongside, and that's been something we've been able to communicate really effectively with people. People were very warm to us, but the vast majority within those groups that we identified hadn't supported us. So that hypothesis that basically all the gay people who were going to support THT had already done it and were, they'd moved on, that didn't hold water. There is still a lot of opportunity, and we're focusing on that at the moment. Equally, it's really important to understand that our services and our beneficiary-led work is going to a much broader population. And you don't have to be as equitable in fundraising as you do in service delivery. There is, cutting through all of it, there is strong support for sexual health services, but a lot of people felt it should be delivered by the NHS, and there is strong support for us helping people to live well with HIV. So I probably need to rattle through the next couple of bits. So what came next? nfp produced really fantastic data packs and pen portraits with us. We had induction days with the team to help really bring the audiences to life. And we started thinking about what initial products we could develop. And there was a whole raft of them that we were thinking through. But one of the key decisions that we needed to make was how we were going to use this. So, we've already had a decision about who the audience is. Because it's demographic, we've got a key decision on how we're going to use it. The reason it was a decision is what you want to do is get this information stored in your database. So basically, every time you've got a supporter, you can put them in a little box. And when you pull off the data, it pulls it off in that box. But we're dealing with very sensitive data here. And so there's GDPR issues about collecting a lot of it. A lot of people won't give it. And we can't put proxies in place. We can't say, because someone has responded to it X, we can assume they're a gay person over 45, as you can do with attitudinal stuff. So we kind of decided that was a little bit of a red herring and we were going to hold off. But what we have been doing is saying we can use this very much in terms of marketing, developing our products. So really using the research that we've got to develop new things. But the other good thing about a demographic segmentation, you might not be able to house it in the database, but you can buy it on Facebook. So on social, we were able to buy against those groups. And we've then been digging deeper and finding other things that fit within those audiences, and we've been finding that our digital targeting has been getting better and better and better. So I would say, before you make any decisions about what your audiences are going to look like, think of how you're going to use it. Think of how, involve your database team on that and really get them to think about how practical it's going to be. Involve your digital team as well, because when we had an attitudinal survey at Prostate Cancer UK, our big thing was, well, we can't go and find these people because we don't know what they look like. We know what they think, but we can't buy them. I'll rattle to the end now. We were doing loads and loads of this development when the pandemic hit about a year ago, and a lot of investment in our organisation was just put on hold. But we have used a lot of it to drive stuff forward in the meantime. So we've been really working to move forward in the interim our messaging around our DM programme, and we've been seeing way better results. So we've been getting much better average gifts and response rates. We have moved forward a walking programme, which is one of the key things that came out with a successful pilot. We know that people wanted to know more about the impact and about the history of HIV, so we had a quiz as data capture recently, which was on the back of It's a Sin, and that in the space of a couple of weeks generated about 3,000 leads for us. We've also put an innovation process in place. And the good thing is, we were expecting our income to drop last year, or the year we've just come out of. We've actually been able to keep our income at the same level. In fact, some areas, our direct marketing, for instance, income has risen last year. Our regular giving, we've been able to increase. Our cash giving, we've been able to increase. And we're back on a growth path for this year. And I think having those audiences very clearly defined is a big part of that for us. So loads of stuff happening this year. We know our audiences love going to the theatre and dining in, so we're going to be doing pilots around that. We're going to be trying a pilot around regular giving, so value exchange for parents, so offering people within that 35 to 54 female audience sexual health guides as to how they can talk to their kids, which is one of the key things that came out of the research. We're going to pilot that this year. Looking at pilots within the Black audience, and so working with our outreach teams on that to look at what we want to do. Working on corporate engagement, and we've nearly finished our messaging framework using all of the stuff that we found to actually have a really clear organisational way of talking to our audiences that is fully joined up. So I'll wrap up. So in a nutshell, what do I think segmentation can do? It might tell you things you already knew. We did have a bit of a moment where we got the data back and we got the initial findings back and we went, oh yeah, that's not really a surprise, is it? But we had gone round and round in circles debating some of this stuff, and there was always opinions on the table, whereas now we have facts. So if you've got something you can't agree on in terms of who your target audiences should be, this will help. And put those decisions and those hypotheses in at the start to test them. It means we're being much more unapologetic in our targeting. So we don't mind if we're putting things out and it just looks like it's skewing towards particular audiences, because that's the point. We have got a really clear language about how we talk about our audiences, and when we're developing anything, we think about it very clearly. And our whole calendar for the year and our whole business planning process has been done through the lens of those 4 audiences. As I said, our digital targeting is getting better than ever, and we're seeing much better metrics in terms of a lot of our delivery in terms of our direct marketing. So it would be wrong of me to say that it can give you everything that you need, but it will give you a lot. And for fundraising and leading fundraising forward, it's given me a strategic direction to take things in, to tell you things that you might have assumed but not been able to back up, and to be able to look at your programme and see what's missing and help you to know what you need to put in there. So that's it from me.